Hey, it's Keisha here with Defending the Early Years podcast. We'll be focusing on amplifying the voices of early childhood educators, advocates, and all of those who love children.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Defending the Early Years podcast. Today, I am excited to welcome a friend, Rukia Rogers. Rukia is the founder of the Highlander School located in Atlanta, Georgia. And you might have seen her beautiful face on the cover of the book written by Deb Curtis called Teaching. What is it called, Rukia? Teaching Together with Young Children.
Yeah, Teaching Together with Young Children.
I don't know why I wanted to put the word learning in there, like teaching and learning together with kids. But, and you guys have a second edition. And is it right that you're working on a new book? Is that right?
Yeah, so Deb Curtis and myself are in the process of writing a book about children's eagerness to be in relationships with each other, and will really feature a lot of the work that's being done at the Highlander School. So really excited about that process, because honestly, it's been a really learning process, even for myself. Anytime you put something on paper for the purpose of sharing with others, it forces you to reflect, to really think deeply about your own practices and how it is aligned or not aligned with your values.
Yes. Well, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here on the podcast, because you are doing some great work. And I think that what you have going on over there in Atlanta will be such an inspiration to so many programs. So welcome, and tell us a little bit about what you got going on over there.
What I got going. Let me pause first and just say, I'm so happy to be here in this conversation with you, Keisha. I have been totally stalking you and your work for many, many years. So thrilled to be here in this moment and have this conversation with a brilliant educator as yourself. So again, absolutely. So as you offered, had worked many years as an early childhood educator myself, 30 years or more to be exact. Now I'm revealing a little bit about my age. There we go. But wanted to really create a space that had the freedom and openness to design curriculum as I saw it. So almost 10 years ago, opened the Highlander School in 2013. We are a really small, nature-centered preschool program situated in East Atlanta. For those of you who aren't familiar with that landscape, we're just down the street from the birth home and the resting home of Dr. Martin Luther King, and so much activism as a part of our culture, of our community. And again, we've been, as a program, deeply influenced by the educators of Reggio Emilia, but also the Civil Rights Movement, Black Panthers, Bell Hooks, many, many others. And I'd say in terms of what we have going on, we're in a place of evolution, maybe even revolution, where we started off kind of, again, nature-centered school. But I think even as we use this term, opening up, almost 10 years ago, it was still from a very dominant white supremacist lens in terms of nature being commodity, and really re-questioning, rethinking our work of what does it mean for young children to be in kinship with Earth, in relationship with Earth, and really a profound moment of, again, rethinking what's the purpose of education? Why are we doing what we're doing? We know that at the turn of the century, schools were founded because factory owners said people needed basic skills. So most of our schools and programs are modeled after factories. They're modeled after the capitalistic grind, and really set the premise for children to become workers. And we're in a place where we really want to push back on that. Again, what does it mean for children to have agency over their bodies? What does it mean for children, again, to be connected to the natural world? And so what does it mean for them to be activists and speak out for injustice and so forth? So a lot of what we've had going on recently has been listening very deeply to the children's relationship with the earth, offering it back to them for reflection, learning, We began, for example, a community garden, which kind of came up from the children's constant awareness that members of our community that they could see did not have homes, did not have access to food, and were really calling to us like, this is not fair. And so because we listened so intently to the children, really taking this up with the children to start a community garden in relationship with many other members of our community. And we actually got a farming track number through the USDA. So that's all part of our work too, but just this constant creating balance and harmony with the land, with children and with families. So lots of planting native plants, lots of community gardens and so forth is kind of a little bit of the juice that has been going on and how much we are learning from children about the ways that they perceive in our relationship with the natural world. And that's a powerful place to be. And I'm honored.
Yes, yes. I mean, they teach us so much. And I love what you said about really listening to their voice, reflecting on your work as you're writing this new book. And I love the focus of the book being children being in relationship with each other.
Mm-hmm.
It is just so profound to sit back and watch. Even toddlers develop these deep relationships with each other. And as you said, with the earth, with the space, with the community, and see just see how much they have to offer us. You opened around the same time I opened. So while you've been watching me, I've been watching you. And and I've seen such I mean, I feel like you've always started from a place of a deep respect for children. It's always been there. I see anyone can see it in your center, the way that your center is designed, the way that you have living rooms instead of classrooms,
Well, thank
the
you.
way that the furniture is I mean, you're exposing the children to such beauty and such creativity. And now with this community garden, I see something new. Like I see your beautiful vision sprouting and growing.
Mhm.
What sparked that change? Like what I know that you said that you guys heard the children's voice and fairness and their exposure to people who didn't have what they have. How did that come about? How did they express that to you? How did you guys take that and turn it into such a wonderful project that you have going on?
Yeah, no, important question of like, what inspired us, what kind of made that shift. I would say a deep listening to children, a very deep listening to children. Thinking about the book, and we talk about eagerness for relationships. Well, what we learned from children is that their view of community was much more expansive to us. They did not make the distinctions in the way that I believe the adult world does. For example, we had a child by the name of Langston, for children interviewing community members. And they interviewed the librarian, they interviewed a gentleman who worked at the coffee shop and so forth, but they also insisted that we need to interview that referred to like other tree in the neighborhood. And we were like, wow, it never occurred to us. We assumed that they were going to interview humans, but they taught us in so many ways that their sense of community and relationship was more than the human
Mhm.
world. For example, a group of children had a conversation about citizenship and who could be citizens. And the children, of course, referred to babies and other humans, but they also talked about turtles
Mhm.
and bears and so forth. So I think the shift for us, and I won't say it's a shift, I think we've always listened to children, but creating the space and time to reflect with other adults, to analyze the documentation, to come together in terms of camaraderie. Um, we value the listening to children, and there also has to be the time and space for adults to really make meaning of what's being heard and what's being said, to see like, well, this is a new thought for us. When we think of community, we think of our families, we think of maybe our friends and so forth. And when children are talking about it, they are talking about oftentimes folks who are outside their walls, neighbors, but against the ants, the bugs, and so forth. And there was a member of our community. His name was Cedric, and the children would see him, and they saw that it was raining, and he was sleeping outside. And it's unfortunate that the children see this, but because of the image that we hold of children, we also recognize it creates an opportunity for conversations. And the children said, we need to give him food, and we need to give him food from the school. And the teachers did explain that you had to have a special permit to feed from the school. And they said this was an unfair law. They had drafted a letter to the mayor. She was actually getting ready to come to the school, and then COVID started. But they were just talking about, we needed to give him food. It's just an assumption. And so that's really, again, where the idea for the community garden happened, because we had a garden in the back that was just kind of for us. But this garden that we've shifted to in the front was, again, and thinking about people who are experiencing homelessness. But even as we began to have conversations with the children, they wanted to create a space of comfort for the community garden, for the snakes and for the kittens and for the birds and for the bees. Because you think of a community garden, you think, okay, we're trying to keep the insects out.
Yeah.
The children are saying, no, we want to create a space where we're welcoming children in. So to your question of, I think just the deep level of listening to children and respect for children, what they have to say, and really taking it up very seriously. And again, shifting, and we've always felt like our role as educators is not to pour information into their heads.
Yes, I'm sitting here jotting down that.
Yeah, like we're constructing knowledge together, and there are places for elders and wisdom of those who have more experience. But children come into this world, and I've said it many times, I believe, strongly connected to their ancestors. They come with ways of knowing. Again, I believe that children are born and have many ways of knowing that are taught out of them, that they are our strongest connection to our ancestors. They have many different senses that we can't even analyze, and they have intuition, and again, many ways of knowing, and that the way often schools are structured, that we teach it out of them, the grind, the pressure, the requirement of them following the rules and not having agency over their bodies.
Yeah. We teach them not to trust themselves.
Experiences of, exactly, not to trust themselves. Being connected to the world by walking around barefoot. Yeah. What does it mean to be connected and feel and understand Earth by just walking her? And so many messages we do of like teaching that nature are bad. Yeah. So yeah, lots of listening to the children, I think, in a deeper way.
And I think that the model that you're speaking of, it takes what the children is saying seriously. And I think what we do a lot of times, for example, if we were talking about citizenship in a traditional classroom, and the children said the bears and the cats, the teacher would immediately correct that and immediately steer them in the way of the adult, or in the way that we think, what I find beautiful about what you guys did was you stopped and you reflected on that perspective. I love that they thought about the turtles and the snakes. And instead of you guys saying, oh, absolutely not, the turtles will eat all the lettuce, you listened to that and you saw the beauty in it. You saw their perspective. And I think that just does so much to solidify within them that their voice matters, that their voice means something, and that their perspective is important. I love it. I love where this is taking your program. And I can't even imagine what is going to come of the entire experience. There's something else that you said that I thought was really profound, and it's that you guys are learning alongside each other. It is not there's a dance, and sometimes the child is leading that and saying something to you that makes you think, oh, I never thought about that. The bears and the animals as citizens here. I never thought about that. And then there's other times when you may be giving some information to the child that you have from your experience living on this earth. And then there are times when you guys are finding something together, working in the garden. I know that when we worked in the garden in our school, I learned so much about how to just raise vegetables and fruits and what bugs were helping us and what bugs were hurting us alongside the children. So it's such a beautiful balance and dance and learning environment where it's not one over the other, but it's us together. And I think you so
Yes.
beautifully created that environment. How are your families involved with this shift or the development and growth of your program over these last 9 years? Do you have a lot of parent involvement, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think the way our handbook uses the term relationship based communication, and relationships is really the center of everything that we do. And again, recognizing this is not a service, you pay us money, and in exchange for the money,
Mm,
this is what we're providing you for, but that we're in partnership with families to raise their
their
children. And
child,
so
yes.
yeah, that has to be. So it has to be a strong collaboration, a strong buy-in. I've done as a director a much better job of giving tours and initial enrollment, of really speaking to our core values and so forth. Because things came up and I was like, whoa, that's not really coincides with our value, but let me speak more to that. So what we've kind of designed our school in such a way over the years is we have different ways in which we gather. So, for example, we have a parent council, which is at least two representatives of each classroom. And anyone can join the conversations. And they've been particularly important, for example, during a time of COVID where people weren't coming in the building to share information, to even vote about different things that were coming up, to really make sure that parents had a voice in terms of what was happening and what was taking place. Also, the families meet quarterly with the teachers as far as a room meeting, and often what is taking place in the classroom that is offered back, and there is a parallel of experiences. So if we're talking now to children about this question of how do children view the rights of the natural world, is inviting families to participate in that conversation. We also, for example, have a social justice committee, which has just been really phenomenal and just really came out organically from the families. Particularly, it came out in response to several violent murders of Black men that were visible to our community and the nation and the world, and just like how are we going to respond, and has really grown into the parents being partners with us, of us living into our values, especially as it relates to anti-bias, anti-racist practices. So there's many different ways in which families can step in to the program and have buy-in and so forth. And then that's also through documentation that teachers offer to families and often invite them to reflect with us, to respond with us. Even before we enroll, we can have home visits where educators go into the homes of families. Again, that was a little bit more challenging during COVID. We were sitting on the porch, but still really building relationships and knowing families full well. This year, we've been thinking really deeply about our ancestors. So the staff, instead of just having their picture and their name, we've invited them to share the narratives and stories of their ancestors. And in turn, we're also asking families to share the stories and narratives of their ancestors, bringing those stories as well as photographs and artifacts, which is particularly helpful because in the Southeast, and I'm from the Midwest, if you can't tell by my accent, we have kind of like these enclaves of like, this is a Greek neighborhood, or this is, this different ethnicities. And in the Southeast, especially for a lot of our white children, don't have a lot of language around their ancestors or even their whiteness. So even these conversations around identity are, really important. So we're constantly finding ways to invite families into, and I don't even like the word invite because it's their right to be there,
Yeah.
but for
Yeah.
them to be partners with us in designing the curriculum, the feedback, and so forth. And they've been really there with us and in a fundamental and beautiful way. I mean, we couldn't have done the community garden, for example, if the parents hadn't showed up multiple times for work days.
Yeah.
So that's been beautiful.
So how would you counsel or advise a person who runs a program right now who is like really interested and fascinated by some of these ideas to start implementing them in their own program? Especially, and really the overall idea would be, let me ask you this more specifically.
Sure.
What tips would you give a director, a founder, even a teacher? What tips would you give them to setting up an environment where they are able to take the time and the space to really listen to children and reflect upon what they're telling them and implement into the program? So, what do you think would be the best tip for someone who needs to do that, who's working on doing that, who's interested in doing that? Like, I would think that it would take, in some places, a real cultural shift. So, any tips you have for going there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important question, Keisha. I think my tendency in the past has been that I would go somewhere and see something with like, oh, I want to do it. And just knowing that a lot of this work that we see in different spaces has taken years to
Yeah.
build, and
Mhm.
that it has to be done in relationship for people to do something without the context or the meaning for them. It becomes hierarchical. It becomes, okay, I'm doing this not because there's this yearning, but because I'm told to do it. So if you have a cultural shift that you are trying to make, then you have to create the space and time for the conversations with families, with educators, the teachers, and sharing the thinking, getting input. Even having someone come in and speak and share the ways in which their educators are listening to children and so forth. And then budgeting wise, just looking at things like planning time. You have to have the time for teachers to be able to meet away from children on behalf of children. Looking at other different strategies. Sometimes we think it has to be, listening has to be this big, to do. We feel overwhelmed about it. Like, I don't want to do the documentation panel is so hard, but it could be really small clips in these small, rich, beautiful moments. And
Mhm.
so that could be whoever is kind of responsible in the program for pedagogical leadership to be side by side with teachers, creating provocations or listening to their play, recording it, and then offering it back to the whole group to make meaning of it. And it could influence the ways in which you offer maybe more materials, or you may decide very often, as we should do, to step back and not interfere with children's
Mhm.
play. So I think being in relationship with your community and having those conversations for listening, giving it the time and space for folks to gather, to share what they have collected and so forth, and then having someone in the space who can be with teachers side by side to help with that process, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I love that. And I love that you pointed out that you can't just see something on Instagram or Facebook and say, "Oh, I'm doing that tomorrow," because they're when it's done right and when it's authentic, it's organic and it came from um the experiences of those people who are experiencing it. There's that, but then there's something to be said for um a vision and a passion and a way of wanting to be. So if I say I want my children to be important citizens in our community, I can start from there and say, okay, well, how can we make that happen? And then take it back to the children and listen to their voice and move from there. So I think you can have some goals that are inspired by what you see, but just taking a snapshot of what somebody's doing and replicating it in your program is not going to hold the richness and the real value that what you're doing here. And like you said, it takes years and it unfolds and it's organic and it shifts and it changes. And I'm looking forward to seeing how your program shifts and changes for the next 10 more years, and so on and so on and so on. So if you can tell us, how can people get in contact with you if someone's really interested in learning a little bit more about this process of being and listening and growing a program? How could they get in contact with you and learn a little bit more about your program?
Sure. So folks can definitely follow us on Instagram. We got a lot better on social media with COVID, and families for one period of time weren't entering the building. So you can follow us on Instagram, the Highlander School ATL. We're also on Facebook, again, the Highlander School ATL. Our website is www.thehighlanderschool.com. And one lasting remark that I would also like to make is I forget in this tip that you offered this beautiful question of how to help directors make a shift. I think one of the most important things that I forgot to say was also making a shift in the way that you view children. That if you view them as something that needs to be taught and filled with information, as opposed to they every single day come to this space in school with many things worthy of hearing and saying and doing. I think that's one of the major shifts is how we view young children in our spaces. But those are some of the ways to get a hold of us, to contact us, to hear some of the stories of our work that we are sharing. And we're open to questions and critiquing, because I think that's how you continuously reflect upon your work, is being asked about it, or at even times challenged about it.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing, the sharing of your work that you do, and for the time today to tell us a little bit more about it. I hope everyone goes to your website to get some more information and to be inspired. Thank you so much, Rukia, for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure, Keisha.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
And that was another episode of the Defending the Early Years podcast. Defending the Early Years works to support the rights and needs of young children nationally. Learn more at DEY.org. Pay us a visit, sign up for our newsletter, or connect with us on social media. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.